Hey guys, Omar here. This is part 2 to our little motorcycle trip through New York. In that video, we did a little bit of a hybrid shoot in which I was using the Fujifilm camera, my favorite way to use it, which is to take a little bit of video and then actually do my favorite thing, which is photography. So I'm going to show you how to set up your camera to work as a hybrid camera, shooting both video and photo. And this is something awesome to do traveling, if you're on holiday. Now, let's start by saying that Fujifilm is not the easiest hybrid camera. With the release of the XS10, Fujifilm has moved a little bit more in that direction. And they've also added some features we'll talk about on the XT3 and XT4, which make switching between the two easier. With the Canon cameras I've owned, I feel like those were some of the best hybrid cameras. Have like a very easy to switch photo to video setting. And I've actually been on vacation shooting video, and then I see something I love. And then while you're shooting video during the recording, you could actually shoot photos and then continue shooting videos. So, I almost swallowed my own finger there. And the Sony cameras, I'm filming this on the Sony a7 III right now, they have, little custom settings which you can set up all your video settings to be saved onto a dial. And so it makes switching to video a lot quicker, the Sony cameras. Now, if you don't care about two things, then switching from photo to video is going to be super easy for you. Here are the two things. The first one is, if you don't mind some of your video's exposure changing while you're filming. If you're in a semi-auto mode on Fujifilm cameras, you get exposure stepping sometimes. Like you go from a bright area that you're filming to a darker area, the camera needs to adjust. So if you don't care about the exposure changing while you're filming, then you're on the right track for easy switching. The second thing that makes your life easier that if you don't care about is like shutter judder, I call it. To shoot video, you're supposed to be in a specific, for video snobs out there, you have to be in a specific shutter speed for the video to look good and smooth and filmic. If your shutter speed is too high, then the video starts to look weird. Like if you're filming cars and they're going by, they look like a little too sharp. So the rule is your shutter speed for video is supposed to be double your frame rate. So if you're shooting at 30 frames a second, you should have your shutter living at 1/60th of a second, for example. So you're supposed to pick specific shutter speeds to make your videos look smooth, but you have to ask yourself, do you really care? Is the gear gonna get in the way of you filming, of you making content, of you actually going to the video mode? So my philosophy is this: I don't really care so much about frame rate. I really just want to capture moments. And if the gear is getting in the way and I'm not shooting video, that just brings me down. So really, I just want to switch it to a video mode, capture some video quickly, and then get back to doing photography. You have to decide how important the look of the video is for you, and you can make your own choices if you need to get a neutral density filter to lower your shutter speeds, if you are going to be more conscious about those shutter speeds. That's a personal choice. For me, I'd rather get the shot quickly and get beautiful moments of my kids, of the location we're at, and move on. Keep it fun, people. Keep it fun. Okay, so if you don't care about those two things, shutter judder or exposure going all over the place, then I love my Fujifilm XT20's auto switch. I've talked about this many times, but this auto switch is fantastic for hybrid shooting. The XT30 has it. Switching to this mode is this quick. All you have to do is switch to the video mode and hit the auto. You can then hit record and take lots of videos. What's great about this auto switch is the camera takes care of all the exposure and in the shutter speed. But the great thing is that continuous autofocus comes on automatically. And that you'll see is one of the issues if you try to be a hybrid shooter with like an XT2 or an XT3. Some of the continuous autofocus with the... I can't talk. Now, there is one decision you need to make before you switch to this auto mode, and you need to make it on all the Fujifilm cameras, and it's what frame rate you'll be shooting at. Now, personally, I like to shoot mostly at 30 frames a second, and 60 frames a second. In the hybrid video that I did in New York and Soho, I shot everything in 60 frames a second because I knew that I would be taking photos and then I was just gonna slow everything down. With 60 frames a second, if you're shooting in 60 frames a second, you could slow everything to 50%, half speed. A lot of videographers like to shoot at 24 frames a second. I like that too. It has like a more filmic looking, smoother look. So 24 frames a second I like doing as well. So I'll shoot 24 and 60 frames a second if I want to slow stuff down. Now that 60 frames a second on the computer, you can slow it down 40%. That'll make it work on a 24 frames per second timeline. But you need to decide that first before you switch to auto, because you set your frame rate in the camera, and as soon as you switch to auto, it's going to default to that. The main thing to know here, if you're not very video-centric, is to try to record everything in the same frames per second and get consistent, because you could put all your videos together and there won't be like conflicts with frame rate. Hi, I'm in your face. Do you appreciate that there's no mid-roll ad in this video? Please hit like. I did that on purpose for you, so you don't have to suffer by a video being interrupted annoyingly in the middle. Please like. The other thing you need to decide is 4K or 1080p. I've been shooting everything in 4K because it looks so great. I could crop in as well. But you have to consider your hard drive space and what's your output? Like, are you delivering this to clients? Are these just like home movies for fun? Most of my home movies and everything I do with the family is just 1080p. One of the main reasons, by the way, is because the XT20 doesn't have face detection in 4K. Neither does the XT2. But I don't really use the XT2 for video because I'll talk about that in a second. XT2 is kind of a pain for hybrid shooters. The XT20, I'll shoot 4K if we're traveling and I'm, videoing the mountain. But as soon as I'm doing like a talking head or if I'm videoing the kids or anything, I have to switch it to 1080p for that face detection. Now, if you're shooting the XT3 or XT4, the newer cameras, they have face detection in 4K. So if hard drive space is not an issue, I would shoot in 4K so that you have the highest quality amazingness. By the way, there's a time limit on how much you can record. I think it's like 15 minutes of recording on the XT2, XT20, to like 10 minutes in 4K or something. So keep that in mind. You're not going to be recording a long time. But the way I like recording hybrid is just small clips anyway. Okay, so the XT2, switching between the settings of video and settings for photo are kind of a pain if you want to dial all your settings in. You're going to see in a second that the XT3 is so much better. You can actually separate photo and video. But on the XT2, photo settings and video settings live together. So if you're shooting photos at a certain shutter speed, like 1/1000, and you want to shoot video, well, you got to go switch your mode to video mode. And then you have to change your shutter speed to the actual shutter speed you need. And then you have to fix your aperture so stuff is not overexposed. So you actually have to dial in all your settings. If you want to use the XT2 as a hybrid camera, then I would recommend, let's say your photo first. Have your photo settings. If you see something, I would just switch really quick to AAA, AAA, and let the camera video for you. Now, one thing that's kind of a pain is you have to make sure you're switched to continuous focus mode. If you're shooting photos in single focus mode and then you try to shoot video and you're like, the camera can't focus, it's because by default it doesn't go to continuous focus if you go to video mode, which I think is strange. A lot of cameras, if you switch to a video mode, they go right to continuous focus. Even the XT3, which is a better video hybrid camera, it won't go into continuous focus unless you're in face detection. So that's a kind of a little bit of a hack you can do. If you have face detection or eye detection on, the camera will continuously focus in a movie mode. So that's how I would use the X-T2 as a hybrid camera. All right, and let's talk about my Fujifilm X-T3 settings for the New York Soho shoot. You want to go to your video settings to the last page. That's 3 out of 5. But you want movie silent control set to on. What the silent movie controls allows you to do is, as soon as you go from photo to video, then these dials don't work anymore. They're actually disabled. And at first I thought that was kind of a bit of a pain. However, what's great is if I touch this little touch screen here are the things that you can have set ready for your movie mode. You can have your shutter speed set. And what's cool is Fujifilm has set up the shutter speeds, the popular shutter speeds for video. So since I'm shooting at 30 frames a second, I set it to 60. Okay, let me go back. The next one is the f-stop. This depends. If your lighting situation is very even, then I would pick a shallow depth of field because I want my video to look cinematic, have a lot of bokeh. So you can actually dial in your aperture. Now, I think if the lighting situations are changing or you want to be a little bit more lazy and walk around and you don't care about the exposure stepping too much. By the way, you can prevent exposure stepping by pointing the camera at what you're going to record and waiting a second and then record, and you won't get too much exposure stepping. It's only when you're really panning around and the meter is picking up strange dark and bright places. So think about that. Next, my exposure comp is always about 1/3 up. Fujifilm's meter seems to underexpose a little bit. Set that to your liking, that's fine. And then the ISO set to auto. This will make your exposure bump up and down. If you want a little bit more movie control, you're gonna have to go in every time and set your ISO. I wish it would tell you what ISO it's picking. That's something that's a little bit of a pain. The microphone I have set to manual. I usually leave it on 0. The film that I use for the Soho, I use Provia with a shadow -2 just to give it a little bit more of a flat profile. But most people like Eterna, so I've been kind of playing around with Eterna, but I usually don't like its color. So I've boosted Eterna's color to +2. And here's what's cool. Let's show you here. You see how my color is set to +2? Now watch, I'm gonna change my dial to photo. Where are we? Photo here. And if I go back to my quick menu, it's on standard film simulation. It's not on Eterna anymore. And my color is set to 0. So my photo settings are saved. If I switch back to video, I can go here and then I'm still on Eterna. This is a great way you can do it on the X-T4 and the X-T3 is the camera has all its video settings set, it's got its white balance set. So that is the best way to have your camera ready to shoot video. Couple of other things to think about, the movie settings, the movie compression or type, I don't even know what it's called, but I recommend leaving it at 264. If you are concerned about computer space and card space, H.265 is a higher film codec, I guess it's called. Richer color, better looking video. For the most part, if you're just casually shooting, keep it at 264. It's gonna save a lot of computer space. Your computer won't struggle. If you have an older computer and you don't have a lot of memory, any kind of editing in 265 is gonna really bog down your system. Keep it the compression on lung up. You can actually do internal super slow-mo. I don't use that too often, but I think if like the kids were jumping in the pool, I would go over here and just do it all internal in the camera. For movie AF, I have it on area. If you have it on multi, that means the camera is gonna pick for you and the camera is so dumb. Now, since I'm not a professional videographer, I use the film simulation to record, but you can actually record in what's called vlog. And that lets you have a super like washed out picture, which then you can bring into the computer and edit and stuff and put a LUT on there. That's a lot of work. So those are my settings, but what if I was video-centric first? If I was video-centric first and then I'm just taking a couple of quick photos, then I would manually set everything using the dials. Okay, so now I'm keeping my shutter around what makes sense, and you'll have to do photography using the other two. So that's another option, is you are gonna do photo using, you've decided, 125th per second. Now with this image stabilized 18 to 55, that's fast enough to do architecture and maybe some people walking really slow, but I don't have to change my shutter knowing that I'm going to be shooting a little bit of video. So that's your other option, is keep two of your dials available to change settings for photo video, and then you can switch between the two. Now, note about image stabilization. If you have the XT4, XS10, then you can pretty much use any lens. For the Soho video, all my video was handheld with the 18 to 55 because it has image stabilization. Now, one thing that concerns me about Fujifilm's IBIS is with internal IBIS, like on the XS10, and a lens that has image stabilization, I felt like the two were fighting each other.